changed anything?
No. The one thing I would have changed is I wouldn't have changed the decision. No, I wouldn't have changed the decision because I think, some people say, well, why didn't you just restore the car tax and raise property tax? If we had done that, the problem would be essentially solved. In that moment, I didn't think it was the right thing to do. I thought doing everything we could to avoid imposing more taxes was the right thing. The one thing I would change is I would have talked more about not just the stuff we had done to get us through the hard times, but the challenges that lie ahead.
And do you think you would have been elected to Congress had you done that?
Yes, absolutely. I think people know. Look, people know that people know that cities and towns, and province was no exception, were facing big, tough challenges based on the state cuts. There was a city in receivership. There was a city with junk bond status. So I think everyone was aware there were really tough challenges. I wish I had talked more about not just the stuff we got done well, but also the challenges that lie ahead.
Sure. In the WPRO debate when you were running for Congress, you mentioned you building up the rainy day fund, and I believe it was Jim Hummel from the Hummel Report who mentioned the rainy day fund had been tapped into, and it hit a nerve. You could tell it hit a nerve during that debate. What do you want to say today about whether or not that you were forthcoming about hitting the rainy day fund?
I've always acknowledged we used the rainy day fund. I don't think there was any question about that. We built up the rainy day fund, which was hard to do. Because it requires you not only to pay all your bills, but then to save money. And the purpose of the rainy day fund is that you use that. You hope never to use it. It's always a use of last resort. But again, we did that as part of a budget process, and we did it in a way that, again, was designed to protect taxpayers from a tax increase. And it was raining. It was the most difficult financial challenge the city had faced, at least in a generation. We had, incredibly, incredibly difficult recession. We had these devastating cuts from the state, the loss of the city. So I think it was an appropriate time to use a rainy day fund. That's why we built it up. You never want to use it as a place of first resort, but I think it was the right decision. In retrospect, some people have said, well, again, raising taxes would have been easy. I think the amount was, if you restored the car tax, it was generate $17 million. And then if you raised property taxes to the cap, it's considerably more than that. That would sort of solve the problem. And in the end, some combination of that's going to have to happen. Cuts and tax increase and General Assembly relief. But in that moment, I think, and this was the council's view too, and I think it was the right one, that we should do everything we could to avoid a tax increase because people were still, and we still are, in the middle of a really deep recession. It's really hard for families right now. The idea of imposing an additional tax was something I was unwilling to do, and the council was. And to avoid doing it until it absolutely had to be done was, I think, our strategy.
The 170 police officers and firefighters who may be getting pink slips today, even. It could happen as early as today. People look back at the negotiations over the years with the Providence Fire Department and say, well, Mayor Cicilline strung them along, and then never settled on a contract, and then when it was time to run for Congress, he quickly put together the paperwork, and now we're paying for it in hindsight.
No, we didn't quickly put together. We were in negotiations for a very long time, and if you remember, I was the subject of pickets for a very, very long time. So, was it
to avoid the pickets when you were running for Congress?
No, I mean, there was no assurance that pickets were going to be avoided one way or the other. But if you remember, what happened was there were really two key issues that were the result of an impasse in the fire department, and that was sharing of health care costs and wages. And when there was finally an arbitration award which broke that impasse and set both the wages and awarded a sharing of health care costs, because they were the only employees at that time who did not share in health care costs in the entire city. When I took office, nobody did. And we negotiated or won by arbitration a sharing of health care costs for every single city employee for the first time in our city's history. The only one that didn't was the fire department. Once those issues broke, that logjam broke, we were able to resolve the balance of the issues and produce a contract that saved a lot of money. And so, that would not have happened but for that final arbitration award. And but again, these are the kinds of decisions that mayors and town managers across Rhode Island and across this country are going to have to make about what combination of cuts and what combinations of new revenues and what combination of new efficiencies or maybe state legislation can you combine to get through these difficult times.
Speaking of mayors, surely you have sat down with Mayor Taveras to talk about what's going on. Has there been a moment of candor between the two of you where, you expressed frustration, he's expressed frustration? What sort of conversations have you guys had behind the scenes about this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the conversation I have with the mayor, between the mayor and I, but I think, look, this is the mayor's job in this city and in any city is a tough job. And it's an incredibly tough job in this recession. I think if you talk to my former colleagues around the country, they will acknowledge it. These are hard times for mayors of cities, and it requires difficult choices because, cities are where services are delivered directly to people. And so, when the federal government cuts money and when the state cuts money and those costs get shifted onto cities, they don't have a choice. They have to deliver services. And so there is no question that that's the biggest challenge that cities are facing, and Providence is no exception. And, those are hard jobs. I think the mayor put together a great set of options, some combination of those things. Will successfully close this gap. I mean, some of those things were things we tried, that relate to the Water Supply Board and relate to more revenues from colleges and universities. And I hope he has more success than I did on some of those issues, and I hope some of the momentum, and as the situation becomes more challenging, I think there will hopefully be more willingness of the General Assembly to do some of those things. But those are tough decisions, and the city or town governments don't have the ability to pass it on to anybody. They have, city mayors, and town managers can say, oh, you know what, this year I'm not going to do schools, or this year we're just not going to have a fire department. I mean, those are services that have to be provided. So making those choices about where you make those reductions so that you also protect taxpayers from tax increases, those are hard choices, and they're not easy answers. But I think the mayor has a great team, and he's put forth a great set of options, and I have every confidence he's going to do it.
How would you rate your time as mayor of Providence? How would you grade it?
Look, I'm very proud of the work we accomplished when I was mayor. It's not for me to give
grade.
Guess what? That's the wonderful thing in politics. You don't give yourself a grade. The voters grade you. You give me a B.
What do you think the voters would grade right now? So the residents of Providence, with everything that's going on, what do you think they would say about the job you did?
What I hope the voters of Providence would say and look at is the work that we did for 8 years, and not define my administration, the work of my administration, by the difficult economy of the last year. I think when you look at what we did to restore honesty and integrity to city government, what we did to reduce the crime rate to the lowest in 30 years, the investments we made in education and rebuilding our schools, our school facilities, as well as our race to the top, the after-school programs, the new investment we brought to the city, I trust the voters will be fair in their judgment. And I think, but look, none of that matters if you don't have a job and you're losing your home, and in this deep recession, that's the single most important priority. Is, it doesn't matter what people think of me, it's what's happening in their own lives.
So again, the one regret you have is that you didn't have enough conversations with the residents of Providence about how dangerous the situation was.
Yeah, I regret that when I talked about the finances of our city and talked about the work we had done, the really good work in cutting positions and negotiating for the first time for payments in health care and enacting pension reform, not all the reform I asked for, but the council enacted some of them, and talking about the work we've done and what the world would have been like if that had not happened and what our challenges would be, and talking about how we were positioned to get through this, talking also about what was obvious to me, and I talked about at the General Assembly and in my budget addresses, that these state cuts would be devastating, talking more about the implications of those cuts to the future budgets. I wish I had done more of that, because I think it would have given people a better context of what I was talking about.
You often say, I am proud. You lead off a lot with that. I am proud. And then some folks would say, well, the city has been run into the ground over the years. It's in tough shape right now. What's your regret, if any?
No, I am very proud of the work that my administration did as mayor of the city.
So are you saying as soon as you left, it whoosh,
No, I don't think that's my point. That's to the point you just asked me. I don't think it's to the moment I left just went. I think those challenges which we faced and continue to face because of the state cuts and because of this recession were things that I talked about in my budget address. I traveled to the State House a lot, sometimes with other mayors testifying, sometimes alone, saying to the state, you cannot make these kinds of cuts on cities. Mayor Doyle, we all made that case. Yeah. If you do this, it will be devastating. So I did talk about those things, the consequences of it. I wish I had talked more about it, because I think people heard just the excellent, about the work I had done, which is sort of human nature, I guess, to talk about the stuff you're proud of and not about all the looming challenges. But those shortfalls and those challenges we were facing because of the budget cuts existed because of the state cutting almost $53 million from us. And, you can argue with the choices we made about not raising taxes or not imposing the car tax or other choices we made. You can't argue with the fact that the cause of this is the cuts from the state of more than $53 million or $53 million. And if that hadn't happened, if the state had, there would be no deficit. I mean, you would end up having virtually no problem. So we had done, when I took office, we had a structural deficit. We chipped away at it every year and had made real progress. And then the recession hits and the state cuts hit, and we're almost back to square one. And that's sort of the reality.
Good news is you get your car back.
Exactly.
Did you get my car back?
Was it okay?
It was okay.
It wasn't a
No,
backhanded
camera was
ploy?
stolen, but
Oh.
other than that, it was
right.
okay.
All right, we do have to get a quick check on the traffic. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman David
Are we done?
Cicilline.
We're done.
Can I just say,
Yes.
Woonsocket Town Hall tonight? There's a town hall meeting. Can I just say,
Yes.
5 o'clock at the Woonsocket Senior Center? Encourage people to come.
Say
This
hello
is
to
in the
mayor
district
for
with
us.
David.
Very
No,
right?
that's tomorrow.
Well, that's tomorrow.
In Pawtucket.
All
Tonight's in
It's all on
Woonsocket.
your website, right, Jessica?
Yes.
It's all on the website. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Congressman
Thank you.
David Cicilline, for coming in this morning. It is a little after 8:50.